I woke up at 2 a.m. and caught my daughter-in-law stealing my debit card in the dark. She photographed both sides and put it back. I said nothing. The next morning, I checked my account and couldn't believe what I saw. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret Louise Anderson, and I'm 68 years old. If you saw me at the grocery store or sitting on my front porch, you'd probably think I was just another ordinary grandmother living a quiet life. But my story is anything but ordinary. And what happened to me could happen to anyone. Let me tell you who I really am. I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter. And for 43 years, I've been a mother who would have done absolutely anything for her children. When I was just 28 years old, my world fell apart. My husband, Robert, died suddenly of a heart attack. One moment we were planning our 10th anniversary trip, and the next moment I was a widow with 3 children under the age of 8. I had exactly $340 in our checking account and a mountain of medical bills. Most women in my situation would have crumbled. Some days I wanted to. But when you have 3 pairs of little eyes looking up at you, depending on you, trusting you to keep them safe, you find strength you never knew existed. I went back to school while working 2 jobs. I became a registered nurse, working double shifts at County General Hospital. There were nights I was so exhausted I cried in my car before driving home. There were weeks I survived on coffee and peanut butter sandwiches so my kids could have hot meals. I wore the same winter coat for 17 years. I cut my own hair. I never bought anything new for myself that wasn't absolutely necessary. But my children? They had everything they needed. Daniel, my youngest, never went to school without lunch money. Rebecca, my middle child, got her braces. Thomas, my oldest, went to college. I made sure of it. I worked overtime. I took extra shifts on holidays. I missed sleep, missed meals, missed having any life of my own, and I did it gladly because that's what mothers do. That's what love looks like. When Daniel met Sarah 8 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms. She seemed sweet, polite, and genuinely in love with my son. At their wedding, I gave them $15,000 from my carefully guarded savings to help with the down payment on their first house. When the twins were born 5 years ago, I was in that delivery room holding Sarah's hand. I became the grandmother who babysat every Tuesday and Thursday without complaint. I never asked for gas money. I never asked to be paid. Family doesn't charge family, right? I taught my children values: honesty, integrity, loyalty, kindness. I believed that if you poured enough love into people, that love would create good human beings who would never hurt you. I believed family was sacred. I believed that my sacrifices would be remembered, appreciated, honored. I was so wrong. That night at 2 a.m., when I saw Sarah crouched in my dark kitchen with my debit card in her hands, everything I believed about family shattered like glass. In that moment, watching her photograph my card with cold calculation, I realized something terrible. The daughter-in-law I'd trusted had been planning something, and my son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, was part of it. I had no idea just how deep the betrayal went, but I was about to find out, and it would break my heart in ways I never thought possible. Before that terrible night, my life had fallen into a rhythm that felt comfortable, safe, and full of simple joys. I'd wake up every morning at 6 a.m., make myself a cup of black coffee, and sit on my back porch watching the sun rise over my small garden. Those quiet moments were my meditation, my peace. I'd worked so hard for so many years, and retirement finally gave me the space to just breathe. My days were predictable in the best possible way. Mondays, I'd go to the community center for a quilting group with other women my age. We'd talk about our grandchildren, share recipes, and laugh about getting older. Tuesdays and Thursdays were my babysitting days. Daniel and Sarah would drop off the twins, Emma and Lucas, around 8 a.m. Those 2 5-year-olds were the light of my life. We'd make pancakes together, play in the backyard, read stories, and build elaborate towers with blocks. When Sarah picked them up in the evening, she'd always hug me tight and say, "Mom, I don't know what we'd do without you." Wednesdays, I'd tend to my garden, growing tomatoes, herbs, and roses. My late husband Robert had planted that first rose bush 40 years ago, and I'd kept it alive all these years. Sometimes I'd talk to him while pulling weeds, telling him about the grandchildren he never got to meet. Fridays were for grocery shopping and paying bills. Saturdays, I'd clean my little two-bedroom house from top to bottom, the same house where I'd raised my 3 children. But Sundays were sacred. Every single Sunday for the past 5 years, Daniel's family would come over for dinner. I'd spend the whole afternoon cooking: pot roast with carrots and potatoes, homemade rolls, apple pie from scratch using my mother's recipe. The house would fill with the smell of comfort food and the sound of family laughter. Daniel would kiss my cheek when he arrived. Sarah would compliment every dish. The twins would run around my small living room playing tag. We'd sit around my old wooden dining table, the same one where I'd fed my children thousands of meals, and we'd talk about our weeks. Those dinners made everything worth it. All the years of struggle, all the sacrifices, all the lonely nights after Robert died. In those moments, I felt rich, not in money, but in love. I'd look around that table and think, this is what I worked for. This is why I never gave up. My finances were modest but stable. I received $1,147 a month from Robert's pension and about $1,200 from my own nursing retirement. It wasn't much, but my house was paid off, and I'd learned to live frugally decades ago. My greatest source of pride was the $47,000 I'd managed to save over the years. That money represented every overtime shift, every coupon clipped, every vacation never taken. I kept it in a savings account for emergencies. Maybe a new roof someday, maybe medical expenses as I got older, maybe something special for my grandchildren's college funds. I trusted everyone in my life completely. Why wouldn't I? My purse sat on the kitchen counter every single day, unlocked and accessible. My debit card was in my wallet. My checkbook was in the drawer. I never worried about it because I never had reason to. Sarah had been in my house hundreds of times. Daniel had his own key. They were family. I genuinely believed I was living the reward for a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. I thought I'd finally reached the chapter of my life where I could relax, enjoy my grandchildren, and feel secure. I had no idea that beneath the surface of those perfect Sunday dinners, something terrible was growing. A plan was forming, and the people I trusted most were about to betray me in ways I couldn't even imagine. Looking back now, I can see exactly when the cracks started to appear. But at the time, they were so small, so subtle, that I convinced myself I was imagining things. The first incident happened on a Thursday afternoon about 3 weeks before that horrible night. Sarah had come to pick up the twins after I'd babysat them all day. Emma and Lucas were playing in the living room with their toy cars when Sarah asked if she could use my bathroom. "Of course, honey," I told her. "You know where it is." She headed down the hallway, but a few minutes later, I realized I hadn't heard the bathroom door close or the water run. I walked toward the hallway and saw her coming out of my bedroom instead. My purse was sitting on my dresser where I'd left it that morning. "Sarah, everything okay?" I called out. She jumped slightly, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh, Mom, you startled me. I was just looking for some tissues. I thought you might have a box in your room." She smiled, but something about it seemed forced, tight. "There's tissues in the bathroom cabinet," I said slowly. "Right, I forgot. Silly me." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. When she left with the kids, I went into my bedroom. My purse was unzipped. I always zipped it closed. Always. I looked through it carefully. My wallet was there. My debit card was there. Everything seemed normal, but the contents were slightly rearranged, as if someone had been searching through it. I stood there for a long moment, my heart beating a little faster than normal. Then I shook my head. I was being paranoid. Sarah probably had just grabbed the purse by accident while looking for tissues. It was nothing. 2 days later, on Saturday evening, I decided to drop off some homemade cookies at Daniel and Sarah's house. I loved surprising them. When I pulled up to their driveway, I could see them both sitting in their car in the garage. They appeared to be having an intense conversation. Daniel's hands were gesturing emphatically. Sarah was leaning forward, her face serious and focused. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the body language was unmistakable. This wasn't a casual chat. This was something important, something serious. The moment they saw me walking toward the car, they both stopped talking immediately. Daniel's face broke into a huge smile as he rolled down the window. "Mom, what a nice surprise." "What were you two talking about so seriously?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light and playful. Daniel and Sarah exchanged the briefest glance. It lasted maybe half a second, but I saw it. "Oh, we were just discussing the twins' birthday party," Sarah said quickly. "We want to make it really special this year, so we're planning a big surprise." "That's wonderful," I said, handing them the container of cookies. But something felt off. Their explanation was too quick, too rehearsed. And why would they need to have such an intense private conversation about a 5-year-old's birthday party? That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about these two strange incidents: the purse, the secretive conversation. But then I'd remember all the good times, all the hugs, all the "I love you, Mom" messages Sarah sent me. All the years Daniel had been a loving son. I was letting my imagination run wild. Maybe I was just getting old and suspicious for no reason. The following Tuesday, something else happened that I couldn't quite explain away. My bank called me in the late afternoon. "Mrs. Anderson, this is Karen from First National Bank. We're calling to verify some recent account activity. Did you authorize someone to inquire about your account balance and recent transactions?" My stomach tightened. "No, I didn't." "What kind of inquiry?" "Someone called claiming to be you, asking about your current balance and spending history. Our system flagged it as potentially suspicious because the caller couldn't provide your security code word." "I have no idea who that was," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "We've made a note in your file. Please monitor your account closely and let us know if you see anything unusual." I hung up the phone and sat down heavily on my kitchen chair. 3 strange things in 2 weeks: the purse incident, the secretive conversation, now someone trying to access information about my bank account. Were they connected? Was I being targeted by some scammer? It never once occurred to me that the threat might be coming from inside my own family. I spent the next several days trying desperately to convince myself that I was overreacting. Every time a suspicious thought crept into my mind, I'd immediately push it away and replace it with a logical explanation. This is what denial looks like. You see the warning signs, but you're so terrified of what they might mean that you create an entire alternate reality where everything is fine. Sarah had been nothing but kind to me for 8 years. She called me Mom instead of Margaret. She sent me sweet text messages with photos of the twins. Just last month, she'd brought me flowers for no reason at all, saying, "I saw these and thought of you." Would someone planning to hurt me bring me flowers? Would someone plotting against me hug me so warmly every time we said goodbye? It didn't make sense. It couldn't be her. And Daniel? My baby boy? I'd raised him. I knew every scar on his body and the story behind each one. The one on his knee from falling off his bike when he was 7. The one on his elbow from climbing that tree against my warnings when he was 10. I remembered staying up all night when he had pneumonia at age 12, holding cold compresses to his burning forehead. I remembered teaching him to drive, attending every single one of his basketball games, helping him move into his first apartment. That little boy had cried in my arms when his goldfish died. He'd made me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings and misspelled words. Would that child grow up to steal from me? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I told myself the purse incident was nothing. Maybe Sarah really had been looking for tissues and got confused. Maybe I'd left my purse unzipped myself and forgotten about it. I was getting older. My memory wasn't what it used to be. Perhaps I was misremembering small details. The suspicious phone call to my bank? That had to be a scammer, some random criminal who somehow got my information. It happened to people all the time. I'd read about it in the news. Identity theft was everywhere these days. It probably had nothing to do with my family at all. I should just be more careful with my information, maybe monitor my accounts more closely. Problem solved. And that intense conversation I'd witnessed in the car? I replayed it in my mind over and over, trying to see it differently. Maybe they really were planning an elaborate birthday party for the twins. Maybe they were discussing something stressful about Daniel's job. Maybe they were having a private marital discussion and didn't want to burden me with their problems. There could be 1,000 innocent explanations. Every time doubt crept in, I'd think about Sunday dinners. I'd remember the twins climbing into my lap, their small arms around my neck. I'd remember Sarah laughing at my jokes. I'd remember Daniel saying, "Love you, Mom," as he left my house. Those memories felt real and solid. The suspicious incidents felt like shadows, like tricks of an aging mind. I wanted so desperately to believe in the goodness of my family. I'd spent 40 years building these relationships. I'd poured everything I had into my children. The alternative was too painful to consider. If I admitted that something was wrong, if I acknowledged that Daniel and Sarah might be deceiving me, then what did that say about my entire life? What did it say about all my sacrifices? What did it say about my judgment as a mother? So I did what so many victims do. I made excuses. I rationalized. I minimized. I convinced myself that love and trust were enough to protect me. I told myself that family bonds were unbreakable, that blood was thicker than water, that people who smiled at you and hugged you couldn't possibly be planning to hurt you. I chose to believe the comfortable lie instead of the uncomfortable truth. And with every day that passed, with every doubt I pushed down and ignored, I was giving them more time, more access, more opportunity to do exactly what they were planning. That Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep. My arthritis had been bothering me all day, a dull ache that settled deep in my knees and hands. By 2 a.m., the pain had intensified enough that I needed to get up and take my medication. I kept my pills in the kitchen cabinet along with a glass I used for water. I swung my legs out of bed slowly, the way you do when you're 68 and your body doesn't move the way it used to. I didn't bother turning on the bedroom light. After living in the same house for 40 years, I knew every inch of it in the dark. I padded down the hallway in my slippers, my hand trailing along the wall for balance. Daniel and Sarah were staying over that night. They'd mentioned something about their water heater breaking and needing emergency repairs, so they'd asked if they could sleep in my guest room with the twins. Of course, I'd said yes. I'd always said yes. The guest room door was closed, and I assumed everyone was sleeping peacefully. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, the way I always left it. As I stepped into the hallway, I could see directly into the kitchen. The house was completely dark except for a small beam of light moving around near my kitchen counter. My heart jumped into my throat. Was someone breaking in? I froze, pressing myself against the hallway wall, barely breathing. Then I recognized the silhouette. It was Sarah. She was crouched down near the counter where I always kept my purse, her phone's flashlight casting a bright glow over the area. What was she doing? Why was she going through my things in the middle of the night? I should have called out right then. I should have turned on the lights and asked her what she was doing. But something stopped me. Some instinct told me to stay hidden, to watch, to gather information before acting. I remained perfectly still in the shadows of the hallway, my hand covering my mouth to muffle my breathing. Sarah opened my purse with careful, deliberate movements. She wasn't fumbling or searching randomly. She knew exactly what she was looking for. She reached inside and pulled out my wallet. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. She opened the wallet and extracted my debit card, holding it under her phone's light. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She positioned her phone directly above the card, making sure the flashlight illuminated it completely, and took a photograph. I could hear the soft click of the camera shutter in the silent house. She was photographing my debit card. Why would she need a photo of my debit card? But she wasn't finished. She flipped the card over with her fingers, being so careful not to drop it or make any noise. She positioned her phone again and took another photograph of the back of the card, the side with the security code, the CVV number that you need for online purchases. My legs felt weak. I gripped the wall to keep from collapsing. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Sarah was deliberately stealing my card information in the middle of the night while she thought I was asleep. This was planned. This was intentional. This was betrayal in its purest form. She put my debit card back into my wallet, placed the wallet back into my purse, and zipped everything up exactly as she'd found it. She even repositioned the purse at the same angle it had been sitting. She'd done this before, I realized with horror. She knew exactly how to cover her tracks. This level of precision came from practice. Sarah stood up slowly, turned off her phone's flashlight, and tiptoed back toward the guest room. I watched her shadow disappear down the hallway. I heard the soft click of the guest room door closing. Then silence. I stood in that dark hallway for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Part of me wanted to burst into that guest room and confront her immediately. Part of me wanted to call the police right then. But a larger part of me was simply in shock, unable to process what I'd just witnessed. My daughter-in-law had just stolen my financial information, and I had no idea what she planned to do with it. The rest of that night was torture. I went back to my bedroom, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of my bed in the darkness. My mind was spinning with questions. Should I confront her in the morning? Should I pretend I didn't see anything? What was she planning to do with photos of my debit card? And the biggest question of all, the one that made my stomach turn, did Daniel know? I didn't sleep at all. I sat there watching the window slowly lighten with dawn, playing that scene over and over in my mind. By 6 a.m., I'd made a decision. I would act completely normal. I would smile and make breakfast and pretend everything was fine. Because I needed to know the full truth before I acted. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. When Sarah and Daniel emerged from the guest room with the sleepy twins, I was already in the kitchen making pancakes. "Good morning," I called out cheerfully, though my voice sounded false even to my own ears. "Who wants chocolate chip pancakes?" Emma and Lucas ran to me with excited squeals. Sarah kissed my cheek. "You're the best, Mom." The casual intimacy of that gesture, after what I'd witnessed just hours before, made my skin crawl. But I smiled. I served breakfast. I laughed at the twins' silly jokes. I was an actress playing the role of the unsuspecting grandmother. The moment their car pulled out of my driveway, I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called my bank. "First National Bank. This is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you today?" "This is Margaret Anderson. I need to check my recent transactions immediately. Account number 478296351147. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson. Let me pull that up for you." There was a pause, the sound of keyboard clicking. "Okay, I'm looking at your checking account. What time frame would you like me to review?" "The last 2 weeks." "All right, I see your usual monthly pension deposits, a few grocery store purchases, your electric bill payment. Then there's a transaction for $2,800 on October 18th to a site called luxurygambling.com. Does that sound familiar?" My heart stopped. $2,800? No, I've never heard of that website. "There's another one here on October 22nd, $2,500 to designerhandbags.net. And then on October 26th, there's a $3,200 charge to Tropical Getaways, a travel booking website." The room started spinning. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself. "That's over $7,000. I didn't make any of those purchases. I've been robbed." Jennifer's voice became more serious. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Anderson. I'm going to transfer you to our fraud department immediately. But I have to tell you, because you didn't report the earlier suspicious inquiry we called you about, and because these transactions occurred over multiple days, it may be difficult to recover all the funds. The bank's liability is limited when there's a delay in reporting. Difficult to recover. The words echoed in my head as I was transferred to another department, as I answered the same questions over and over, as I filed a formal fraud report. When I finally hung up the phone 45 minutes later, I felt completely numb. They'd stolen $7,500 from me. Maybe more. The bank representative said they'd investigate, but she couldn't promise anything. I sat at my kitchen table and cried, not just tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere in my chest. How could she do this? How could someone look me in the eye, call me mom, hug me, and then steal from me while I slept under the same roof? But I needed answers. I needed to know if this was just Sarah or if Daniel was involved too. I needed to see the full picture of the betrayal. My son had given me his social media password years ago during a family emergency, when he needed me to check a message while he was out of cell service. I'd never used it since. It felt like such a violation of privacy, but desperate times called for desperate measures. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and logged into Daniel's Facebook account using that old password. It still worked. I went to his messages and saw Sarah's name at the top of the list. I clicked it, and what I read destroyed me completely. Sarah. It worked. I got clear photos of both sides, card number and CVV. Daniel. Perfect. Told you she'd never notice. Start with small amounts. Sarah. Already ordered that handbag I wanted, $1,500. She has like 47 colors in there, babe. She won't miss it. Daniel. Let's book that Hawaii trip we've been talking about. We deserve a vacation. Sarah. Done. Booked for January, $3,200. This is so easy. Daniel. Just be careful. Space out the purchases. We can't have her getting suspicious before we're ready. The messages went on and on. Planning, laughing, discussing me like I was a fool, like my kindness was stupidity, like my trust was a weakness to exploit. My own son, my baby, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. He wasn't just aware of the theft. He was orchestrating it. I couldn't stop reading. Every message felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart, but I had to know everything. I scrolled back through months of conversations between Daniel and Sarah, and what I discovered was so much worse than simple theft. This wasn't just about stealing a few $1,000s. This was a calculated long-term plan to take everything from me. 3 months earlier, Sarah had sent Daniel a link to an article titled, How to Obtain Power of Attorney for Aging Parents. The message with it read, We need to start thinking about this seriously. She's getting older and more forgetful. We should take control before she does something stupid with her money. Daniel's response made me feel physically sick. Good thinking. My mom trusts me completely. This should be easy. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from screaming. Forgetful? I wasn't forgetful. I was sharp as ever. They were creating a false narrative to justify what they were planning to do. The messages continued. They'd researched my entire financial situation in disturbing detail. Sarah had written out a complete breakdown. House value approximately $285,000. Savings account $47,000. Pension income $3,047 per month. Life insurance policy $150,000. Total assets around $480,000 plus monthly income. We're sitting on a gold mine and just paying for babysitting. Just paying for babysitting. That's what my years of free childcare meant to them. That's what my love reduced down to. A service they were paying for with tolerance. But it got worse. Much worse. I found a saved folder in Daniel's messages labeled Future Planning. Inside were screenshots of articles about nursing homes, legal guardianship, and something that made my blood turn to ice. Information about selling property when you have power of attorney over an elderly parent. Daniel had written, Once we establish that she can't manage her own affairs, we can sell the house. That's almost $300K right there. We could finally get that downtown condo we've always wanted. Sarah replied, What about her? Where would she live? Daniel's answer destroyed me. There's a state-funded nursing home about 40 minutes away. Medicaid would cover most of it. She'd be taken care of, and we'd finally have the financial freedom we deserve. We've sacrificed enough helping her. It's our turn. Sacrificed enough helping her? I was the one who'd sacrificed everything. I was the one who'd given them $15,000 for their house. I was the one who provided free childcare for 5 years. What had they ever sacrificed for me? I kept scrolling, my vision blurring with tears. They'd calculated everything. They'd researched how long it typically takes to gain guardianship over an elderly parent. They'd looked into how to demonstrate that someone is mentally incompetent. They'd even discussed small ways to make me seem more confused and forgetful in front of others. Sarah had written, "When we're at Sunday dinner, ask her the same question twice. Act concerned when she doesn't remember things. Plant seeds with your brother and sister that she's declining. We need witnesses who'll back us up when the time comes." This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just fraud. This was a systematic plan to strip me of my independence, my home, my dignity, and my entire life savings. They wanted to declare me incompetent, take legal control of everything I owned, warehouse me in some state facility, and live off my money while I rotted away somewhere I couldn't cause them any inconvenience. I found more messages discussing the timeline. Daniel had written, "We should move on this within the next year. She's 68 now. The older she gets, the easier it'll be to convince people she can't handle her own affairs. Plus, the longer we wait, the more chance she has to spend down the savings on something stupid." Something stupid? Like what? Living my own life? Enjoying the retirement I'd earned? Having the dignity of making my own choices? There were messages about which lawyer to use. Messages about how to approach my other children, Rebecca and Thomas, to get them on board or at least keep them from interfering. Messages about what to do if I resisted. "We'll say she's paranoid and delusional," Sarah had written. Classic signs of dementia. They had an answer for everything. They'd thought of every angle, and the most horrifying part was how casual it all was. They discussed stealing my entire life with the same tone people use to plan a vacation or decide what to have for dinner. There was no guilt, no hesitation, no moment where either of them said, "Wait, maybe this is wrong." I sat back in my chair, staring at the computer screen, trying to process the enormity of what I was reading. My son wasn't just stealing money from me. He was planning to erase me, to take away my home, my independence, my dignity, my freedom, to lock me away somewhere while he and Sarah lived in a luxury condo bought with my money, raised my grandchildren on my dime, and probably visited me once a month out of obligation. I'd given him life. I'd given him everything. And this was how he repaid me. I don't remember closing the laptop. I don't remember walking from the kitchen to the living room. But suddenly, I was on the floor, my back against the couch, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. The sound coming from my throat didn't even sound human. It was primal, animal. The sound of a heart breaking into pieces so small they could never be put back together. Every sacrifice I'd ever made flashed through my mind like a cruel movie montage. I saw myself at 28 years old, standing at Robert's grave with 3 small children clinging to my legs, wondering how I was going to survive. I saw myself working the night shift at the hospital, so exhausted I could barely stand, but forcing myself to keep going because my babies needed food and clothes and a roof over their heads. I remembered the Christmas when Daniel was 7 and wanted a bicycle more than anything in the world. I'd worked double shifts for 2 months straight, skipped meals, sold my wedding ring to a pawn shop just to see his face light up on Christmas morning. I remembered him riding that bike up and down our street, turning back to wave at me every few seconds, shouting, "Look, Mom, look how fast I can go." Where was that little boy now? Where was the child who'd told me I was the best mom in the whole world? Where was the teenager who'd hugged me tight after his high school graduation and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you"? Where was the young man who'd cried at his wedding, and said his only regret was that his father wasn't there to see how happy he was, but that having me there meant everything? When had he changed? When had I become nothing more than a bank account to him? When had my life become an obstacle to his comfort? I crawled across the floor to the wall where I kept my family photos. My body felt heavy, like I was moving through water. I pulled myself up and stared at the pictures through my tears. Daniel's baby photos, his first day of school, his basketball team photo from 8th grade, his college graduation, his wedding day, where he danced with me and told me he loved me. Every single photo was a lie, or maybe it wasn't a lie then, but it had become one. Maybe the love had been real once, and somewhere along the way it had curdled into greed. Maybe I'd raised him with too much softness, too much giving, and not enough lessons about gratitude and integrity. Or maybe I'd done everything right and he'd simply chosen to become someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of looking his own mother in the eye while planning to rob her of everything. I thought about all the times I'd gone without so he could have more. The winter, I'd kept the heat so low I slept in 2 sweaters because the heating bill was due the same week as his school field trip fee. The countless dinners where I'd given him the larger portion and told him I wasn't hungry, even though my stomach was growling. The graduation trip to Washington, D.C. that I'd saved for over 2 years, working overtime shifts until my feet bled in my nursing shoes. What was it all for? What was the point of any of it if this was how it ended? I pulled a photo album from the shelf and opened it with shaking hands. Baby Daniel sleeping in my arms at the hospital. Toddler Daniel covered in mud and grinning at the camera. Little boy Daniel missing his 2 front teeth. Teenage Daniel awkward and gangly in his prom tuxedo. Every stage of his life. Documented with love. I'd been there for all of it. Every fever, every nightmare, every disappointment, every triumph. I'd been the one constant in his life. The one person who'd never let him down, never given up on him, never stopped believing in him. And he was repaying me by planning to have me declared incompetent and locked away in a state nursing home so he could steal my house. I closed the album and pressed it to my chest, rocking back and forth on the floor. My face was soaked with tears. My throat was raw from crying. My chest physically hurt, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart with their fist. For 40 years, I defined myself as a mother. It was my identity, my purpose, my greatest accomplishment. I was Margaret Anderson, the woman who'd raised 3 children alone and done it with love and dignity. Being a mother was who I was. But what did it mean when your own child betrayed you like this? What did it say about everything you'd tried to build? Had I failed? Had all my sacrifices been meaningless? I looked around my small living room, at the worn furniture I'd had for decades, at the curtains I'd sewn myself to save money, at the carpet that needed replacing, but I'd never prioritized because I was always putting my children first. This was my home. The home where I'd raised my family, the home I'd worked my entire life to keep. And they wanted to take it from me. They wanted to erase me. I don't know how long I stayed on that floor. The sunlight moved across the room, shadows shifting and stretching as hours passed. At some point, I stopped crying. Not because the pain had lessened, but because I'd simply run out of tears. My eyes were swollen, my head was pounding, my throat felt like sandpaper. I was empty. But somewhere in that emptiness, something else began to grow. It started as a small spark, barely noticeable at first, a tiny flame of something that wasn't sadness or despair. It was anger. And the more I sat there, the bigger that flame grew until it was burning hot and bright in my chest. No, the word formed in my mind clearly. No, I wouldn't let this happen. No, I wouldn't be their victim. No, I wouldn't go quietly into whatever nightmare they'd planned for me. I pulled myself up off the floor, my joints protesting after sitting in one position for so long. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was blotchy and red. My eyes were bloodshot. My gray hair was a mess. I looked exactly like what I was, a 68-year-old woman who'd just had her heart broken by her own child. But as I stared at my reflection, I saw something else too. I saw a survivor. I saw a woman who'd buried her husband at 28 and somehow found the strength to keep going. I saw a woman who'd worked 2 jobs while going to nursing school with 3 kids at home. I saw someone who'd faced down poverty, exhaustion, and loneliness and had won every single time. I'd survived things that would have destroyed other people. I'd built a life from nothing. I'd raised 3 children on pennies and willpower. I'd never given up, never stopped fighting, never let the world beat me down. And I sure as hell wasn't going to start now. I washed my face with cold water, letting the shock of it clear my head. I brushed my hair and changed into clean clothes. With each small action, I felt stronger, more focused. The grief was still there, sitting heavy in my chest like a stone. But alongside it now was something harder and sharper. Determination. They'd made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. They'd seen an old woman who baked cookies and babysat grandchildren, and they'd assumed I was weak. They'd mistaken my kindness for stupidity, my generosity for gullibility, my love for blindness. They'd thought I'd be easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to erase. They were wrong. I'd spent my entire life being kind, being selfless, being the person everyone could lean on. I'd been the mother who always said yes, who always helped, who always put everyone else's needs before her own. I'd believed that unconditional love meant accepting everything, forgiving everything, allowing everything. But there's a difference between being kind and being a doormat. There's a difference between loving someone and letting them destroy you. I'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed, and on the other side of that line, I'd found something I'd lost years ago. My ability to say no. My right to protect myself. My willingness to fight. They wanted my money? They'd have to fight for every penny, and they'd lose. They wanted my house? Over my dead body. They wanted to have me declared incompetent and locked away? I'd show them just how competent I really was. I thought about all the skills I'd developed over a lifetime. Decades of nursing had taught me to stay calm under pressure, to assess situations quickly, to act decisively when lives were on the line. Decades of single parenthood had taught me to be resourceful, to make something out of nothing, to solve impossible problems with limited resources. Decades of simply surviving had given me a spine of steel wrapped in soft cloth. They'd only ever seen the soft cloth. They'd forgotten about the steel underneath. I walked back to my laptop and opened it again. This time, I didn't cry as I read through Daniel and Sarah's messages. This time, I took screenshots of everything, every conversation, every plan, every casual discussion about stealing from me and locking me away. I created a folder and methodically saved every piece of evidence. Then I opened a new browser window and typed, "Elder financial abuse lawyer near me." They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But this game was going to have rules they'd never anticipated, and the ending was going to be very different from what they'd planned. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, my independence, my home, and my right to live the rest of my life on my own terms. I was fighting for every woman who'd ever been underestimated because of her age. I was fighting for every parent who'd sacrificed everything only to be betrayed. And most of all, I was fighting because I finally understood something crucial. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. The grief was still there, sitting like a weight in my chest, but it no longer paralyzed me. I had work to do. I got dressed carefully, choosing a nice blouse and slacks instead of my usual casual clothes. I wanted to be taken seriously. I wanted to look like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. My first stop was the bank. I walked into First National at 9 a.m. sharp the moment they opened their doors. I asked to speak with a manager, not just a teller. A kind-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia Mills brought me into her office. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Anderson?" I pulled out a folder I'd prepared the night before, filled with printed screenshots and bank statements. "I need to file a formal fraud report. My daughter-in-law has been stealing from my account, and I have evidence that my son has been helping her. This isn't a random scammer. This is elder financial abuse." Patricia's expression shifted from polite professionalism to serious concern. She examined every document I showed her, making notes and asking detailed questions. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. We'll start a full investigation immediately. I'm also going to flag your account with additional security measures. From now on, any transaction over $500 will require verbal confirmation from you personally." "Thank you," I said. "I also need copies of every transaction for the past 6 months. Everything. I'm taking legal action." She nodded approvingly. "You're doing exactly the right thing. Too many people in your situation stay silent out of shame or fear. Give me 20 minutes. While I waited, I made my second call. I'd spent hours the previous night researching lawyers who specialized in elder abuse cases. I'd read reviews, checked credentials, and finally found someone who seemed perfect. Her name was Patricia Chen, and her website stated she'd handled over 200 cases of financial exploitation. I dialed her office. "Chen Legal Services, this is Maria speaking." "Hello, my name is Margaret Anderson. I need to speak with Ms. Chen about an elder financial abuse case. My own son and daughter-in-law have been stealing from me and planning to take control of my assets." There was a brief pause. "Ms. Chen has an opening this afternoon at 2 p.m. Can you come to our office?" "I'll be there." When I met Patricia Chen 3 hours later, I knew immediately I'd found the right person. She was a petite woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. I laid out everything: the midnight theft, the stolen money, the screenshots of their messages, their plans to have me declared incompetent and take my house. Patricia's jaw tightened as she read through the evidence. When she looked up at me, her eyes were blazing. "Mrs. Anderson, what they're doing isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. This is identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. We have multiple paths forward here." "I want to pursue all of them," I said firmly. She smiled, a fierce expression that reminded me of a wolf. "Good. Here's what we're going to do. First, we file criminal charges with the police for identity theft and fraud. The evidence you have is overwhelming. Second, we pursue a civil case for emotional distress and financial damages. Third, we immediately draft a new will and power of attorney documents that explicitly exclude Daniel from any access to your assets or decision-making authority." "What are my chances?" I asked. "With this evidence?" "Excellent. They documented their own crimes. They were so confident you'd never find out that they got sloppy." She leaned forward. "But I need to prepare you for something. This is going to get ugly. They'll likely try to claim you're confused, that you're misinterpreting innocent conversations, that you're experiencing cognitive decline. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. Then I thought about the man who'd written, "She'd be taken care of, and we'd finally have the financial freedom we deserve." "I'm ready." Patricia nodded. "Then here's what we do next. You're going to act completely normal around them. Don't let them know you're aware of anything. Keep attending Sunday dinners. Keep babysitting the twins. Let them think their plan is working. Meanwhile, we're building an ironclad case." Over the next week, I followed Patricia's instructions to the letter. I also did something else she suggested. I set up a small hidden camera in my kitchen, tucked inside a decorative plant on top of my refrigerator. "If they come back and try to access your purse again, we'll have video evidence," Patricia explained. I called my other 2 children, Rebecca and Thomas, and told them everything. They were both horrified and furious. Rebecca, who lived in Oregon, immediately booked a flight. "Mom, I'm coming home. You shouldn't be dealing with this alone." Thomas, always the practical one, said, I'm documenting everything from my end, too. If they try to claim you're incompetent, they'll have to get through both of us. We'll testify that you're completely sound of mind. With Patricia's help, I gathered additional evidence: phone records showing the suspicious call to my bank, security footage from the bank's ATM showing times I was supposedly making withdrawals when I was actually at the grocery store, testimonies from my quilting group friends, my doctor, and my neighbors, all stating I was mentally sharp and fully capable. I revised my entire estate plan. Everything now went to Rebecca and Thomas, with a trust fund for my grandchildren's education that Daniel and Sarah could never touch. I added a clause explicitly stating why Daniel was excluded, referencing his documented financial exploitation and betrayal of trust. Within 10 days, I'd transformed from a grieving mother into a strategic warrior. I had a lawyer, evidence, witnesses, and a plan. Every piece was in place. Now I just had to wait for the right moment to spring the trap. 2 weeks after I'd assembled my evidence and legal team, I made the call. My voice was steady, almost cheerful, as I dialed Daniel's number. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. I was thinking, why don't you all come over for Sunday dinner this week? I'm making pot roast, your favorite, and I picked up some new toys for the twins." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Sure, Mom. That sounds great. We'll be there around 5 p.m.? Perfect. I can't wait to see you all." When I hung up, my hands were trembling, but not from fear, from anticipation. Patricia Chen had prepared me for this moment. "When you're ready," she'd said, "we'll confront them together, in your home, with witnesses. We'll give them a chance to see exactly what they've done and who they've underestimated." I'd chosen Sunday dinner deliberately. It was symbolic. All those years of feeding them, loving them, opening my home to them. This would be the last Sunday dinner we'd ever share, and they had no idea. Patricia arrived at my house at 3 p.m., along with Officer James Rodriguez from the local police department. My daughter Rebecca had flown in the day before and was waiting in my bedroom. My son Thomas was connected via video call on my laptop, ready to witness everything. I'd also quietly informed 3 of my neighbors, Mrs. Chen from next door, Mr. Patterson across the street, and young Emily Rodriguez, who lived 2 houses down. They'd all seen Daniel and Sarah coming and going over the years. They'd all agreed to be available if needed. "Are you sure you want to do it this way?" Patricia asked me, as we did a final review of the evidence. "We could handle this at the police station, make it more formal and less personal." I shook my head. "No, they plan to take my home from me. They need to know that this is still my home, and I'm still in control of what happens here." Officer Rodriguez, a kind man in his 40s, added, "Mrs. Anderson, I've read through all the evidence your attorney provided. What they did to you is unconscionable. I want you to know that we take elder abuse very seriously. You're being incredibly brave." At 4:30 p.m., I started cooking. The smell of pot roast filled the house, just like it had for hundreds of Sunday dinners before. I set the table with my good dishes. I put out fresh flowers. Everything looked normal, peaceful, perfect. The calm before the storm. My heart was pounding as I heard Daniel's car pull into the driveway at 5 p.m. I watched through the window as he and Sarah got out, Sarah carrying a store-bought pie, Daniel helping the twins out of their car seats. Emma and Lucas ran toward the house, their little faces bright with excitement. My heart broke watching them. They were innocent in all this. They had no idea what their parents had done. I opened the door with a smile. There are my babies. I hugged the twins, breathing in their sweet child smell, knowing this might be one of the last times I'd get to hold them. Sarah kissed my cheek. "Something smells amazing, Mom." Daniel hugged me. "Hey, Mom, you look nice. Is that a new blouse?" "Oh, this old thing." I lied easily. "I've had it for years." We all went inside. The twins immediately ran to the toy box I kept for them in the living room. Sarah and Daniel sat at the kitchen table while I finished preparing dinner. We made small talk. Daniel mentioned a project at work. Sarah talked about the twins' preschool performance. Everything was so normal, so routine, so utterly ordinary. I served dinner at 5:30 p.m. We sat around the table, the same table where we'd shared hundreds of meals. Daniel complimented the pot roast. Sarah laughed at something Emma said. I watched them eat food I'd prepared with my own hands, in the home I'd worked 40 years to keep, surrounded by the love I'd poured into every corner of this house. They had no idea that Patricia Chen was in my bedroom reviewing final documents. They had no idea that Officer Rodriguez was standing quietly in my garage, waiting for his cue. They had no idea that Rebecca was recording everything from behind my bedroom door. They had no idea that 3 neighbors were watching from their windows, ready to provide witness statements if needed. They thought this was just another Sunday dinner, another opportunity to deceive the foolish old woman who loved them too much to see the truth. They were about to learn how wrong they were. After dessert, I stood up slowly, smoothing my blouse. "Sarah, honey, before you go, can I ask you something?" She looked up, smiling. "Of course, Mom. What is it?" I looked her directly in the eyes. "Have you been having any luck with online shopping lately?" Her smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" I walked to the counter and picked up a folder I'd placed there earlier. "I mean the 500 designer handbag you bought with my stolen debit card information. I mean the $3,200 vacation to Hawaii you booked with my money. I mean the $2,800 you spent at an online casino." The color drained from Sarah's face. Daniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Mom, what are you talking about?" My voice was calm, steady, cold. "I'm talking about the fact that I saw you, Sarah, at 2 a.m. going through my purse, taking photos of my debit card. I saw everything." The room went completely silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence in my kitchen was so complete I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then everything exploded at once. Sarah's face went from pale white to bright red. I don't know what you're talking about. You must be confused, Mom. Maybe you had a dream or—" "Don't." My voice cut through her excuses like a knife. "Don't insult me by lying to my face right now. I saw you. I have bank records. I have evidence. And I'm not confused, and I'm not senile, and I'm not having cognitive decline, no matter what you two were planning to claim." Daniel tried a different approach. He put on his concerned son face, the one he probably practiced in the mirror. "Mom, please, let's sit down and talk about this calmly. You're clearly upset, and maybe there's been some misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," I interrupted, "was me thinking my son had a conscience." That's when Patricia Chen walked out of my bedroom, her heels clicking purposefully on my kitchen floor. She was carrying a briefcase and had the kind of expression that made it clear she wasn't here for a friendly chat. "Good evening, I'm Patricia Chen, Mrs. Anderson's attorney." Sarah gasped. Daniel's eyes went wide. What is this?" Behind Patricia, Officer Rodriguez stepped into view, his police uniform unmistakable, his hand resting casually near his belt. "I'm Officer James Rodriguez with the local police department." Daniel backed up a step, nearly knocking over his chair. "This is insane. Mom, what are you doing?" "We're family." "That's exactly right, Daniel," I said, my voice shaking now but not with fear, with righteous anger. "We're family, and family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't plan to have their own mother declared incompetent so they can steal her house." Sarah's face went white again. "How did you—" "We never—" "You did." I pulled out my own folder and dropped it on the table with a satisfying thud. "You documented everything in your messages, every plan, every calculation, every discussion about selling my house and putting me in a state nursing home so you could buy a downtown condo." Patricia stepped forward, opening her briefcase with crisp efficiency. "Daniel Anderson and Sarah Anderson, you're being charged with identity theft, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." Wait. Sarah jumped up, and suddenly the mask she'd worn for 8 years completely shattered. her sweet, loving expression twisted into something ugly and desperate. "This is ridiculous. She's old. She has more money than she needs. What is she going to do with it? We have kids to raise. We have a future. She's just going to die and leave it to someone anyway." The cruelty of those words hung in the air. Even Daniel looked shocked at what his wife had just said. But Sarah wasn't finished. Years of hidden resentment came pouring out like poison. "Do you know how exhausting it's been? Pretending to care, spending every Sunday in this tiny, outdated house, babysitting so she could feel important? We deserve that money. We've earned it by putting up with her." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I opened my home to you. I gave you $15,000 for your house. I gave you free childcare for 5 years. I loved you like my own daughter. And we paid for all of that by pretending you weren't a burden," Sarah screamed. "Every Sunday dinner listening to the same stories. Every Tuesday and Thursday dropping the kids off with you. Do you think we enjoyed that? We tolerated it because we knew eventually we'd get what we deserved." Daniel finally found his voice. "Sarah, stop talking. Just stop." But it was too late. She'd already confessed to everything in front of a police officer and a lawyer. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Sarah Anderson, Daniel Anderson, you're under arrest for identity theft and financial fraud against a vulnerable adult." He pulled out handcuffs, and Sarah's bravado finally cracked. "No, no, no, Daniel, do something." She grabbed his arm, but he just stood there, frozen, watching his entire life collapse around him. Then came the twist that nobody expected. My daughter Rebecca stepped out of the bedroom holding her phone. I recorded everything, every word Sarah just said. Behind her, my laptop screen showed Thomas on video call, his face grave. I witnessed it all too, and I've been recording, but there was more. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on the front door, and when I opened it, she wasn't alone. Mr. Patterson and Emily Rodriguez were with her. "We heard shouting," Mrs. Chen said. "We came to make sure you were safe, Margaret." Patricia smiled slightly. "Perfect timing. Did any of you hear what was just said?" All three of my neighbors nodded. Emily, who was studying to be a paralegal, spoke up. "I heard Sarah Anderson admit to deliberately deceiving Mrs. Anderson, calling her a burden, and stating that they felt entitled to her money. I'd be happy to provide a written statement." Sarah looked around the room, seeing all the witnesses, all the evidence, all the people who'd heard her venomous confession. Her face crumpled. "You set us up. This was all a trap." I looked at her steadily. "No, Sarah, you set yourselves up. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourselves with. I learned that from 40 years of being a nurse. Sometimes the best diagnosis comes from letting patients tell you their symptoms in their own words." Officer Rodriguez moved forward with the handcuffs. "You both have the right to remain silent. Though I'd say that ship has sailed. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As he read them their Miranda rights, Daniel finally looked at me. Really looked at me. And for just a second, I saw something that might have been shame in his eyes. "Mom, Don't," I said quietly. "There's nothing you can say that will fix this. You chose money over your mother. You chose greed over integrity. You chose to see me as an obstacle instead of a person who loved you unconditionally for 40 years. The twins, who'd been playing in the living room, started crying, frightened by the shouting and the police officer. Sarah tried to go to them, but Officer Rodriguez stopped her. Rebecca went to the children instead, kneeling down and speaking to them softly. As Daniel and Sarah were led out of my house in handcuffs, Sarah turned back one more time. "You'll never see your grandchildren again. Never. I'll make sure of it." I met her eyes calmly. "Maybe not. But at least they won't grow up thinking it's acceptable to abuse elderly people. At least they won't learn from their parents that love is something you can exploit for money. Maybe someday when they're older, they'll understand that what I did wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching a lesson their parents never learned. Actions have consequences. The door closed behind them, and just like that, they were gone. The house felt impossibly quiet after the police car pulled away. I stood in the doorway watching the red taillights disappear down the street, and for a moment, I felt completely hollow. Rebecca came up beside me and gently took my arm. "Mom, come sit down. You've been so strong, but you don't have to hold it together anymore." I let her guide me to the couch. The tears I'd been holding back finally came, but they were different this time. Not the desperate, broken sobs from before. These were tears of release, of grief, but also of something like relief. "I did the right thing, didn't I?" I asked, my voice small. "You did the only thing you could do," Rebecca said firmly, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. "They were planning to destroy you, Mom. You protected yourself. That's not wrong. That's survival." Over the following weeks and months, the legal process unfolded exactly as Patricia Chen had predicted. With the overwhelming evidence, the recorded confession, multiple witnesses, and the paper trail they'd so carelessly left behind, Daniel and Sarah had no choice but to accept a plea deal. Fighting the charges would have meant a public trial where even more of their cruelty would be exposed, and they'd likely face harsher sentences. Daniel pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit financial fraud and elder exploitation. He received 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service at a senior center, which I thought was particularly fitting, and was ordered to repay every stolen penny plus 18% interest. The judge also mandated that he attend counseling and take classes on financial ethics and elder care. Sarah's sentence was harsher. She pleaded guilty to identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She received 18 months of probation, 750 hours of community service, and a permanent restraining order that prohibited her from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. She was also required to write a formal letter of apology, though when it arrived, it was clearly written by her lawyer and contained no genuine remorse. The court ordered full restitution. Over the next 6 months, I received back every dollar they'd stolen, plus interest, plus compensation for my legal fees. The money appeared in my account in monthly installments, automatically deducted from Daniel's paycheck. Each payment was a reminder of what they'd done, but also of what I'd won. But the most important victory wasn't financial. Patricia Chen helped me revise my entire estate plan. I created an ironclad will that left everything to Rebecca and Thomas, with detailed explanations of why Daniel was excluded. I established an educational trust fund for Emma and Lucas that would pay for their college education when they turned 18. Daniel and Sarah would never be able to touch a penny of it, but my grandchildren would benefit from my years of hard work and saving. I also executed new power of attorney documents, naming Rebecca as my healthcare proxy and Thomas as my financial power of attorney should I ever need such help. The documents included explicit language stating that under no circumstances could Daniel ever make decisions on my behalf. Sarah's parents took temporary custody of the twins during the legal proceedings. It broke my heart knowing Emma and Lucas were caught in the middle of this. I sent cards and small gifts for their birthdays and holidays, rooting them through their other grandparents. I wanted them to know I still loved them, even if I couldn't see them. Rebecca ended up moving back from Oregon. "I've been wanting a change anyway," she said, though I knew she did it partly to be closer to me. She found a good job in the city and rented an apartment just 15 minutes away. She came over for dinner twice a week, and sometimes we'd just sit on my porch together, not even talking, just being together. Thomas called every Sunday, the day that used to be reserved for Daniel's family dinners. We'd talk for an hour, and he'd tell me about his work, his life, his hopes. "I'm sorry I wasn't more involved before," he said during one call. "I took for granted that you were always okay, always strong. I didn't see that you needed support too." "You're here now," I told him. "That's what matters." My quilting group friends rallied around me. When word got out about what had happened, small towns have no secrets, instead of pity, I received respect. "You're a warrior," Mrs. Chen from next door told me. "My sister went through something similar and never had the courage to fight back. You're an inspiration." The house stayed mine. My independence stayed mine. My dignity stayed intact. I'd won every battle that mattered, but victory didn't erase the pain. There were still mornings when I'd wake up and forget for just a moment what had happened, and I'd think about calling Daniel or planning the next Sunday dinner. Then reality would crash back, and I'd have to grieve all over again. I saw a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in family trauma. "You're mourning the loss of who you thought your son was," she explained. "That's a valid grief. The Daniel you loved, the one you raised, may have existed once, or maybe you loved an idealized version of him. Either way, that person is gone, and you have every right to mourn that loss." The therapy helped. Slowly, week by week, the sharp pain dulled to a manageable ache. I learned to talk about what happened without crying. I learned that I could be both heartbroken and proud, devastated and strong. I learned that loving someone who hurt you doesn't make you weak, but protecting yourself from them doesn't make you unloving either. 6 months after that terrible Sunday dinner, I was working in my garden when I heard a car pull up. My body tensed instinctively, but when I looked up, it was just Rebecca. She was carrying grocery bags and wearing a big smile. "I brought ingredients for pot roast," she announced. "I thought maybe we could have our own Sunday dinner tradition. Just us. Thomas is going to video call in." I wiped the dirt from my hands and smiled back at her. "That sounds perfect." As we cooked together in my kitchen, as we laughed and talked and set the table, I realized something important. Daniel and Sarah had tried to take everything from me, my money, my home, my independence, my dignity, but they'd failed. I was still here, still standing, still myself. I'd lost a son, but I'd gained something more valuable. The unshakable knowledge that I was strong enough to protect myself, even when it hurt, even when it meant standing alone, even when it meant losing people I loved. That evening, with Rebecca beside me and Thomas on the laptop screen, we sat down to dinner. The pot roast was perfect. The conversation was warm. The love was real. And for the first time in months, I felt something that had been missing: peace. It's been 6 months since that Sunday dinner changed everything. People ask me if I have regrets, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I miss Daniel, if I think about reaching out, about forgiveness, about giving him another chance. The truth is complicated. Yes, I miss him. I miss the little boy who used to climb into my lap and fall asleep watching cartoons. I miss the teenager who'd sneak into the kitchen at midnight and we'd share ice cream straight from the container. I miss believing that the sacrifices I made created a bond that could never be broken. But the man who planned to steal everything from me and warehouse me in a nursing home? That man I don't miss at all. Some days are harder than others. Last week, I was at the grocery store and saw a father shopping with his 2 children. The little boy was riding in the cart, and the father was making him laugh by pretending the bananas were telephones. For just a moment, I remembered Daniel at that age, and the grief hit me so hard I had to steady myself against the shelf. The wound is still there. I don't know if it will ever fully heal. But here's what I've learned. You can grieve someone who's still alive. You can mourn the relationship you thought you had while simultaneously protecting yourself from the person they actually are. Love and boundaries aren't opposites. They're partners. Real love requires both. I've also learned that being old doesn't mean being powerless. Society tells us that once we reach a certain age, we should be quiet, grateful for whatever scraps of attention we receive, and never cause trouble. We're expected to accept disrespect with grace, to forgive betrayal because family is family, to prioritize peace over justice. But peace without dignity isn't peace at all. It's just surrender. What Daniel and Sarah did to me wasn't just about money, it was about respect. They saw me as less than human, as an obstacle to overcome, as a resource to exploit. They felt entitled to everything I'd worked for simply because I was old and they were young, because I'd been generous and they'd been greedy, because I'd loved them and they'd seen that love as weakness. Standing up to them wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my humanity. It was about saying, I matter. My life matters. My choices matter. My voice matters. Even at 68, even as a grandmother, even as someone who bakes cookies and babysits grandchildren, I am still a full person with rights and dignity that cannot be stolen. The system worked for me because I had evidence, because I fought back, because I refused to stay silent. But I think about all the other elderly people out there who are being exploited by their own families and are too afraid to speak up, too ashamed, too worried about causing family drama, too convinced that keeping the peace is more important than protecting themselves. If my story does anything, I hope it gives someone else the courage to stand up, to say no, to recognize that being kind doesn't mean being a victim, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable. I'm rebuilding my life now. Rebecca and I have our Sunday dinners. Thomas calls every week. My quilting group has become more than just a hobby. It's a community of women who understand that strength comes in many forms. I've even started volunteering at a senior advocacy center, helping other elderly people recognize the signs of financial abuse. My garden is thriving. My house is still mine. I wake up every morning knowing that I stood up for myself when it mattered most. The grief is real, but so is the pride. I survived widowhood at 28. I raised 3 children alone. I worked 2 jobs while going to nursing school. I built a life from nothing, and when that life was threatened, I fought back and won. Some people say I was too harsh, that I should have given them a warning, a chance to make it right, an opportunity to apologize. But here's what those people don't understand. They'd already had years of chances. Every time I gave them money, trusted them with my home, babysat their children, I was giving them a chance to be decent human beings. They chose differently. They chose to photograph my debit card in the dark. They chose to plan my institutionalization while eating my pot roast. They chose greed over love and convenience over integrity. I didn't take away their chance at redemption. They threw it away themselves. Am I lonely sometimes? Yes. Do I wish things had turned out differently? Every single day. But do I regret protecting myself? Not for 1 second. True family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by respect, honesty, and genuine care. Greed destroys relationships faster than any other poison because it transforms people into objects, love into currency, and connection into transaction. And being old doesn't mean surrendering your rights, your voice, or your dignity. Every person, regardless of age, deserves to be treated with respect and protected from those who would exploit their kindness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who've hurt you, is to hold them accountable. Without consequences, people never learn. Without boundaries, love becomes abuse. And without the courage to stand up for yourself, you become invisible in your own life. So now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted them immediately? Or would you have gathered evidence like I did? Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? Has someone in your family ever taken advantage of your kindness? And if you're watching this and you're going through something similar right now, whether you're being exploited financially, emotionally manipulated, or made to feel like your age makes you powerless, please know this: you are not alone, you are not crazy, and you deserve better. Share your story in the comments. You never know who might read it and find the courage they've been looking for. And if this story touched you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that elderly people deserve dignity and respect, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about courage, betrayal, justice, and survival. Remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself. You're never too old to say no. You're never too old to fight back. And you're never, ever too old to matter. My name is Margaret Anderson. I'm 68 years old. And I'm still here, still standing, still strong. Thank you for listening to my story.